Are live streaming this, so this is the first time we've done that with these meetings. So I'm going to try to not pay too much attention to that thing and just talk to you. I like to get out here and talk. So my name is Jason Alexander, Superintendent at Beatrice Public Schools. I want to thank you, first of all, for coming tonight and being part of this community presentation and getting educated on the discussion that we've been having. And literally this discussion has been ongoing prior to my arrival here. It's been in the allow Mr. Eric Hvac a chance to introduce himself and speak a little bit about this particular topic. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jason. Good evening, folks. It's an honor to be here tonight for this very important topic. I am Eric Hvac, new guy on the school board, but where I lag in. So I have 3 kids in school, and I'm very passionate about education, but the 3 things that are very important to me, and I think we all need to think about that, is safety, health, and comfortable environment for these kids to be taught in. And I was one of those guys before that. I was very disappointed with the decisions the school board made in the past. First off, it started with that land purchase out there. Was it right? Was it their right? And it was, but was it right? I think it was something that should have been brought to the people. I think that that kind of had a break with the trust between the school board and the community. As time has grown since that, that was one of the reasons why I ran for school board. They felt like they weren't listening to the people. And, it led right into the 2 failed school bond issues. And I voted no both times for that because I did not have the information. There was a lack of information that wasn't being brought to the people. It was almost like, this is what we need, vote for it. They showed up at my door with this so-called campaign to vote for the school. And they couldn't answer my basic questions. The questions of how much is this going to cost? What are the issues we're facing? How much would it cost to fix the schools as they are? And so I think the community felt that way too, and that's why it failed both times. So I'm here tonight because I want that to eliminate that. I want the people to know that the school board and the administration, we're not trying to hide anything this time around. I want that information out there. And so, of course, one of the first things I requested as a new school board member, I want a tour. I want to see the issues facing our schools. And I said it before, the moment before I walked through those doors on that tour, I was dead set, nope, I am not going to be on board with this. But 5 minutes into that tour, when I stepped in front of that first electrical box, and I just stood there and I saw this outdated, dangerous push-o-matic system that people don't even put in anymore. And also, if you ever want parts for it, they're outrageously expensive, and you have to, if you can find them online. And I'm just looking at this, and Terry Breathauer took me on the tour, good man. He's like, I know. We're just silence. I'm just sitting there looking at that. And then I turn around and I look at these flammable ceiling tiles, thousands of them in every one of these schools, and I'm just imagining, God forbid, a structure fire would happen and one of these ceiling tiles catch fire, and then my children, our children are caught in these buildings. And so safety, health, comfortable environment that we're not giving our kids, and this is something that's very important. So as far as that land purchase out there, just something to think about. I think it's important to think about now. And yes, it was wrong at that time, but if we decided to go down that avenue now, and you looked at how much it was then, which it was very high price then, compared to the price of land today, and we decided to buy that land today, it'd be very comparable. So that's just something to think about. So as I witnessed these issues in our school, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, fire codes broken all over the place. I'm shaking my hand wondering how have we made it this far without something happening. But number 1 on my list, as a Marine, got a fellow Marine sitting right there with me tonight, security. Veterans, active duty service, we all have it ingrained in our system, just a threat assessment. Everywhere we go, that's just how it is in life for us. And as I'm walking down those hallways of those schools, I'm just trying to picture something happening, and where are the safe areas for our kids? these schools were built in the 50s, and it was a different world there. A lot of evil in this world today. And so, God forbid something would happen. Where are these children going to go? And we got classrooms where they have glass from floor to ceiling. Someone wanted to get into those classrooms, there'd be no problem. So, security is something that's number one for me, and I think a new facility absolutely would give that. 21st century technology and safety is very important. So since I've taken these tours, a few other things have really haunted me. The HVAC system. These buildings were designed to have windows that open, so you have this 100% humidity coming into these schools, and there's no way for it to escape. So it's got poor air quality, electrical, and the plumbing. We have pipes that are 50, 60 years old that are pitting, rust water. We got drainage issues. So at the end of the day, if anything would ever happen, I don't want that on my conscience. And especially if we had an opportunity to do something about it. And how long are we going to kick this can down the road before we do something about it? Whether it's we get this thing built in 15 months or it's in 15 years, it's going to get built. So why wait? So I'm very passionate about that. And I'm just honored that I'm in a position right now where I can do something about it. And at the end of the day, people, we need to remember this. This is very important. This is not a political issue. This is not a tax issue. This is a safety issue. And ever since all this has happened, and I've been on the school board and I've seen what's going on, I worry about my kids' safety in there. And I hope that you have an open mind tonight. And I'm going to turn it over now to Aaron Chadwick. Thank you.
I'll just introduce myself real quick. For those who don't know me, I'm Erin Chadwick. I serve on the board. I am a stay-at-home mom now. I've spent the last 4 years working in economic development, though. I'm a business owner, and I've been a community member for the last 9 years. So I view this topic through all of those lenses, and through those lenses, I see a definite need for a new facility. I lived here during the last 2 bond issues. I did vote both times for those issues because I've always been passionate about having nice places and investing in our kids because they're our future. So we're here tonight because we've had bond issue after bond issue fail in this community, and Jason will talk a little bit more about that later. So, excuse me, the school board is just trying to find some creative solutions to a problem that has been plaguing us for a really long time. So, like Eric said, I hope you have an open mind tonight and kind of can hear some of the ideas we're talking about, ways that won't increase taxes, and ways that maybe we can be a little bit more creative in our budget to solve this issue. So, thank you for being here.
Okay, with that said, we're going to go ahead and get started now. Typically, I always like to start out with a joke, but I've been told to cut that portion from the program from very important people in my life, and so I'm going to cut that portion with strong advice that that's not my strength and I need to stick to my day job. So, with that said, we're going to go ahead and get started. I am going to say that, give you a little bit of information. We'll give you an opportunity to ask questions. It says at the end of the program, but if something jumps out at you and you want to ask a question, just raise your hand and go for it, okay? You're not going to offend me, and that's what we're here for, to get the information out and answer the questions that you have. Please be respectful of everyone, that's all we ask, because at the end of the day, we know everybody has different opinions, and everybody's opinion is important, but everybody needs to be respected, and that's universal. So just in light of that, jumping in, kind of piggybacking off of what Eric said, it doesn't matter where you go or what Google engine or search engine you use on the internet. I challenge you to search and Google this question. What are the top 5 investments that a community wants or people want in a community when they're either living there or considering moving there? Okay? And the top 5 investments are in some order or fashion when you search these 5 things. They want safety. They want to know they're safe. They want a good culture. They want to know that in that culture, they feel good about where they're at. And they want safe, updated, equitable schools, health care, housing, and amenities. And when we talk about amenities, there's a lot of things that takes on. It may take on a nice golf course to play golf, if they like golf. It may take on a nice YMCA building to be able to remain fit in and take care of their health care. Maybe a nice hospital, a nice fire hall, because they want to feel safe again. So all of those things fall into that amenities piece that we're talking about. As we go through tonight, I just want to tell you what our objective is. Our objective is to educate you, the community, and explain the common efficiency, equality, and life safety deficiencies that exist in our current PK8 buildings. Now folks, we're going to emphasize PK5, and I think you'll see why by the end of the presentation. But PK8, really, 6-8 is a big part of this topic as well. So we need to keep that at the forefront of our minds as we work our way through this. The fact of the matter is we have significant violations and health safety concerns for our staff and students in these buildings. And I'm going to throw out my disclaimer at this point. That's why I have that up there. If at any point I start to sound like I'm standing on my soapbox or I'm preaching a little bit, I want to apologize ahead of time for that, because it's not that I need to preach to you or our community at all. But what I am is very passionate, like Eric said, about kids. I love kids. I knew I wanted to be a teacher when I was in 6th grade. And I've always felt very strongly about education and the part that it plays in our world. When you think about it, it's the great equalizer. Public education is the great equalizer. And I feel that our kids are important enough that we need to give them the best. That's the angle that I come from. So if I start to sound preachy, I apologize ahead of time. It's just important to me. It's what I think is important. So, moving on. To begin the discussions on the options available, so we're going to educate you on the issues that we have, and we're going to talk about the options that are available. We're going to answer questions and talk about next steps. There are 3 major areas that are addressed, that need addressed in this particular topic that we're talking about. First and foremost, safety and accessibility needs. The Athens Public Schools PK through 8 buildings do not meet basic modern life safety requirements. Life safety and handicap accessibility, we do not meet that. ADA fire code violations, we're going to show you those. We're giving you all the dirt tonight and showing you. Nothing's hidden. We're telling you all about the issues that we have. Food inspection code violations, one of my favorite to talk about. Safety and security needs, environmental air quality concerns, drinking water quality. We want to talk about equitable education offerings between the buildings that we have, the different buildings that we have, and the equitable deficiencies that exist between those buildings. So you'll hear me talk about ADA compliance. ADA stands for American Disabilities Act. We love those acronyms in education, okay? But the American Disabilities Act is a big, big part of what we have requirements that we have to follow. And we're deficient in those things. And then issues that impact the quality of education, the programmatic offering discrepancies among our buildings, and finally, the inefficiencies that exist in our buildings because we have 4 elementary buildings, PK through 5th grade. There's a lot of duplications of services that take place because of that if we were in our own homes or we were in other businesses, we'd say, why do we continue to operate inefficiently like that? That doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're going to talk about those inefficiencies and point some of them out to you. The educational needs of our students. Currently our facilities do not meet the standards of equitable factors relating to student learning. Our special education program is not offered at all schools equitably. We're going to break that down a little bit further later on in the presentation. I mentioned that already, ADA compliance. 21st century learning, our buildings do not support 21st century learning today. Okay? We're behind. Locations exist where access to the internet is difficult. This is something that, quite honestly, folks, in today's educational environments and what we want kids to learn and how we expect them to learn, we have got to have access to the internet in certain parts of our building. And that's not happening. In that there are some parts of our buildings where kids cannot access the internet. Staff cannot access the internet. That may sound like a small thing, but when you're a staff member that's trying to work with a student on on 21st century knowledge or searching the internet for something or working on the internet for something, that's a huge interference. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just that in the 1950s, these buildings weren't built for how we're teaching kids today and how kids are learning today. So we've got to address that issue. Air conditioning units, noise and temperature regulation. I like to stop on this one just for a minute and have you listen. When you research the #1 impact that students have in the classroom that distracts them from the teacher's voice, it's noise. It's noise that's outside of what the teacher is trying to communicate to kids. Believe it or not, sound is one of the biggest distractions to kids learning there is. So look that up. Boiler. Today, boilers are about a little bigger than I am. Okay? They're a little taller, a little broader. I'm catching up on that quickly though. And these boilers are insufficient. The parts for them are obsolete. We literally cannot get parts for these boilers anymore. So as they start to malfunction and as they start to go offline, we struggle with the ability to repair them. Because just as your cars today need parts that fit the modernized mechanical systems in them, boilers have the same issues. Okay? But that's not even the worst of it, to be honest with you. The back side of it, and you can't get to it from the other side. You have to literally reach around the back side and shut the boiler off and know that's there. So in a situation where we have a gas leak, and we have one custodian or two custodians in that building, if one of them does not know or is not available at the time that we have a gas leak, we can have a pretty significant catastrophe on our hands. So it's time, folks, for safety to be looking at how can we update these things to make them safer for everybody around, so we don't end up with that situation on our hands. Fresh airflow, electrical systems, we'll talk about those later on. Fire marshal orders. In 2017, the fire marshal came in and visited our elementary schools and gave us a list of about 40 items that needed to be fixed. 4 specific things that are listed up. Maybe you wanted to replace the kitchen sink. You know as well as I do that when you pull that old kitchen sink out, well, pretty soon the countertops around the sides have started to leak, and they're starting to fall apart. So you got to put in new countertops, right? Well, then guess what? The countertops don't go with the backsplash. So now you're tearing down the backsplash. And then you find that on the backside of the backsplash, you had a leak back there, and the drywall's bad, so you got to tear out the drywall. And then, well, you have an electrical switch down there now for your dishwasher that's got to be replaced. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And that's exactly the issue we face. And I'm going to show you a picture so it becomes more realistic than just what I'm describing, trying to create an analogy with your kitchen. Okay? Basically, we have interior wall and ceiling finish that is not adequate, and it's flammable material. Okay? Classroom doors were noted to have louvers were noted to not have louvers in multiple instances. The door to the hall at the ACP with panic hardware, magnetic open, does not latch when it's closed. Okay? And sprinkler heads were absent at the top of both stairways in the East Campus building. That's at the middle school. That's pretty serious. Okay? So, we're going to show you some pictures. Right here is the fire marshal order. I'm not pulling your leg. That's the order. Those are the 4 things that we're talking about. And down here on item number 28 are the sprinkler heads we're talking about. Pulled right out of the fire marshal's order. There it is. Okay? Here's the pictures of what we're talking about. These tiles on the ceilings of every one of our buildings are flammable. Not only are they flammable, but they're asbestos-based materials. So if we start talking about removing them, we're also talking about asbestos abatement, which becomes a very expensive and tedious process to get out of your buildings. Okay? So this exists in all 3 of our buildings. All 4 of our elementary buildings. At the middle school, we have sprinkler heads we are missing sprinkler heads at a couple of the exits. Well, now that may sound like, well, okay, so use the other exit. Well, it doesn't work that way. And especially for some kids that may be in wheelchairs, or some kids that may be using walkers, or some kids that may have a disability that requires them to get out of the building that way where there's no sprinkler heads. And it doesn't work like you just start taking these tiles out and replacing them. Go back to the kitchen sink analogy. Look at the electrical that runs these hallways that has to be dealt with, okay? You can't just start taking that out and replacing it. It's electricity from 1950s. It wires into a box like you heard Eric talk about, that's a pusher box from 1950. It's not a simple fix. It's not just a simple renovation project. It's way more complicated than the kitchen sink. Current health issues within our buildings. This is literally a pipe that runs into one of our water fountains that kids drink out of. But guess what? They didn't drink out of it last year because we couldn't have water fountains on. So not only is that pipe rusted, decrepitated, and deteriorating right before our very eyes, but it didn't have water run through it a year ago. I don't want to be the first one to drink out of that this year. I'm not signing up for that. And we're asking our kids to. Behind closed doors where people can't see things, we have pipes that are wrapped in asbestos pipe wrap. We have electrical wires that are exposed. That if at any one time a kid happens to slip in there, someone happens to slip in there, whatever, a million scenarios go through your head. We have a liability issue on our hand that we could have corrected. Basic security concerns. This is the one that Eric was talking about earlier. This is the entryway to our preschool building. Now I want you to pay specific close attention to this if you haven't been in this building. As you walk in to this building, right through the middle of the hallway there's a hallway that goes down to the left, and that takes you to the office. But if you walk in the back hallway, right in the middle, and go down the back hallway, you can be in there, lickety-split, have a kid, be out the exit down the back, and we may never even know it. And I hate admitting that. I do. But it's the honest truth. Do we have some surveillance cameras? Yeah, we do. But, to be honest with you, surveillance cameras are only as good as quick as you can get to them. And then the subject and the child are gone. That concerns me. It should concern every single one of us in here. And that's the situation at every single one of our elementary schools, not just our preschool. We'll show you pictures. But along with those lines of security, we don't have security locks. We don't have security cameras in all places. And our security communications are not effective. We found out today, actually we found out yesterday, because one of our schools, our preschool, went into a lockdown, ordered by the police, or a secure, ordered by the police, and we found out that 2 of our rooms couldn't hear that because the intercom systems didn't work. Well, guess what? We just spent money having them fixed this summer. Why don't they work? Because it's a 1950s building that we're trying to put 21st century communication processes in. And it just doesn't flow that easy. And we've got that in building after building after building after building. And it's nobody's fault. It's just the way, the difference between today and what we lived in 1950.
Got a question.
Yeah.
I'm not sidestepping your concern, I agree with what you're saying. Are these doors not locked during school hours?
They are.
So if a visitor or somebody needs to come to the school for business, somebody would need to let them in.
Correct. And that somebody is down the hall,
Yeah.
around the corner down the hall about 20 feet. So we can't really see them. They push a button and they say, I'm here to see so-and-so or so-and-such and pick up so-and-so and so-and-such. But we really can't see them. I mean, they can tell us that. Good question, man. Here's some other basic security concerns at our other 2 elementary schools. Here's Lincoln Elementary, same exact thing. There is nobody at those doors to see who's coming and going. Stoddard Elementary, probably the best scenario but still not good. This right here is the office. You could enter, be down this hallway to the right before anybody knew you were in the building. Kids coming out the door at the end of the school day, a disgruntled parent who is in a divorce situation, enters the building, down the hall to the right, grabs their kid, out the door, doesn't have parental consent to be able to do that, doesn't have parental rights, and there we are. Because we don't have the ability to function in today's society. Current HVAC issues with buildings. Now this is a little bit difficult to see, probably especially for you folks in the back, but I want to point, this arrow is pointing to this water pipe. This is in our middle school building, by the way. This is, so we're talking 6-8 in our computer lab. 6-8 in our computer lab. This water pipe is being held up with shoestrings in order for the water to have the right flow into the HVAC unit to operate. That's just to operate. Now, I didn't say operate effectively. I just said operate. The next picture is the same air conditioning unit that the louvers on it are propped open with a block of wood. Why? It's the only way it works. It's the only way it works. Is that acceptable? Is that acceptable for our day and age? For our kids? It wouldn't be acceptable in some of our businesses. It wouldn't be acceptable in our YMCA. It's not acceptable in our hospital. Why is it acceptable in our school? You may say, well, why is it propped open with a block of wood? I don't know the answer to that. I just know it's the only way it works and the air flows the right way. Yes, it's got louvers right there. But my guess is that internally, there's been parts that have been replaced, and the only way the conditioner operates is with that block of wood. Yeah.
So, you thought about getting in contact with the local HVAC company and seeing what their solution is to this?
That's a great question. We do have a performance contract with the people that operate this, with all of our HVAC systems, and that's their suggestion on how to get it to work. Now, digging in further, could we do that? Probably, but it's going to cost us more to do that.
Yeah, it's on a controller and actuators that goes to their system, and it should be able to, operate by computer system control system.
Yeah, and it is on a controller, but the machine won't function properly through the controls without that block of wood. It's been tried. So, a few of the current structural issues with buildings. This is the outside of one of our buildings. And folks, these buildings have preventative maintenance put into them. They have had, they've been tucked to slide. There was a big question, what do you do, what do you replace that with? Well, I asked that question. What do we replace it with? In our high school, that's 20 years old, they use ceramic tile because you can replace the tile. Okay? You can't chip out the concrete around there and change that for the cost of what it would to put in ceramic tile. Now, that was 20 years ago that took place, the ceramic tile. But I'm sure there's a lot better surfaces now than concrete for that particular issue. Portables. In 2010, Beatrice Public Schools was in need of some expansion at Paddock Lane Elementary for services provided to students that are like occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, hearing therapy, eye therapy. We had no place to offer those services to kids because every single room is taken up. So what we did is we went to Lincoln Public Schools and we said, do you have any temporary portables that you can sell us so we have room until we get something done with our buildings? That was in 2010. So here we are, 11 years later, in used portables that Lincoln Public Schools sold us, servicing these kids and their needs. And they are decaying and in need of major repair right in front of our eyes, and have been, quite honestly, for quite some time. There's holes in the walls where you can actually see through the walls. this is what they look like. That hole right there is what I'm talking about. You can actually look in that and see the floor of the classroom. This window, same thing starting to happen. Down the sides, you can see the siding start to deteriorate. Could we put new siding on? Yeah. We could also put lipstick on a pig. And I'm just being honest. I'm sorry. I'm just being honest. Our kids are in there getting speech therapy, occupational therapy. Things that didn't happen in 1950. This is the other one. And when you go, just go visit them. Ask if you can take a tour of the portables. You'll see that the floors are starting to fall inside of them. The floors are starting to give out. This is my favorite one. Last spring, the food inspector visited our school, one of our elementary schools. And our elementary school kitchenasiums, which we've affectionately changed the name of them now, to kitchenasiums. We were told that we've got to put kitchen sinks in the closets. Because as kids come through the line, between each set of new students that shows up as they come through, in 1950, these closets were put in to store PE equipment. And they still do, operating off on our electric systems right now. Because we don't have enough ampage, we don't have enough outlets like they do in this building right here to plug in for our kids to use computers. And folks, that's the direction they go. We found out last year that that's more important now than it ever has been. And we have situations like this where wiring is exposed to the public. Not only can it be seen, but it's not safe. And again, it's nobody's fault. It's just that you can't wire a 1950s building for today's needs. Another huge issue that we have. This is the outside of Stoddard Elementary. When we talk about American Disabilities Act, we talk about a law that we have to follow. We have a dad that's in a wheelchair that has a son that goes to this school, single parent, and he has to wheel his wheelchair up that grassy knoll to be able to get into the front door of the building. That's not compliant with the American Disabilities Act. Parents, guardians, or students must use the hill if they're in a wheelchair to enter the building like every other student. You see, that's really what it comes down to. Is it comes down to parents, students, patrons should be able to enter the school building the same way, whether you're in a wheelchair, on crutches, walking, running, whatever you're doing, you should, according to the American Disabilities Act, you should be able to enter the front of the building the same way as every other student. At Lincoln Elementary, the entryway you have to park out here. Here's a handicap parking spot. The distance that a parent or a student who has to park to get access to the front of the building is unacceptable according to ADA standards. It's too much of a walk. Now, yeah, is the back door right there? Yes, but somebody has to be at the back door to let them in. And that's not always the case. There's not always somebody there. If they want to come visit or they want to come, they have papers to drop off or they have something to do that requires business at the front of the building, that's where they're supposed to be able to get in, according to the American Disabilities Act. We have that same expectation with every business in town, right? We have that same expectation with our YMCA. We have that same expectation with our hospitals, with our businesses. People are supposed to access the front of the building. Another ADA compliance. We don't have automated door handles where people in wheelchairs can wheel up, push the button, and it's released. So at a secretary's position, the secretary could push a button, release the door handle, open it so that person can get in. We don't have any of those anywhere on our elementary buildings. Okay? And I don't think we do on our middle school. But I should double check that. So we have automated handicap entrance accessibility deficiencies as well. Stoddard Elementary, bullet holes in the window, or secure mode, or some sort of police instigated lockdown, or secure mode system. Because in the neighborhood, there was something going on that police were dealing with that they anticipated could have the possibility of becoming violent. I think that's the security that we're talking about. So when we talk about neighborhoods, I'm not trying to throw shade anybody's way, but one of the things we've heard a lot of times is, well, what about being out next to BSDC? Does that create an issue for us? Is it any worse than this? And can we prevent out there on that land? Yeah, we can. We can take preventative measures. Lincoln Elementary, 19th Street. If you have a student that goes to Lincoln Elementary, or you've been by there during certain periods of the day, you know that this street is busy, busy, busy at pickup and drop-off time. Okay? The city has been very, very accommodable in the past years, helping us create 2 crosswalks. Mr. Jansen's worked on that project, trying to make it safe. But at the end of the day, that street is extremely busy. We even tried to put a cul-de-sac in on the back side. At a dead-end street on the back side that would go into our playground and create a cul-de-sac. The idea behind that was also that it creates an exit and an entrance for city big equipment to get in there, snow removal equipment, garbage equipment, so on and so forth. But one of the things we found out is that, bless their hearts, engineers don't necessarily think about safety when they're designing something, safety of students especially if they're not school engineers. And that cul-de-sac would have been right up on our playground where a car could pull in, grab a kid off the playground, and be gone before we have the opportunity to do anything about it. I will tell you that in my 4 tenures of being here, we have had a student be taken from a school. That's scary to me. And we don't need to expose ourselves to that risk any more than necessary. Okay? Educational equity. Dr. Nielsen's going to talk about that.
Okay, as we are looking at educational equity, what we are looking at are the programs and the classroom experiences that our kids are offering. One of the things that we look at are just looking at Lincoln, Stoddard, and Paddock Lane. With the number of programs that are offered in Paddock Lane, we see some discrepancies. So for example, Paddock Lane has 4 extra classrooms. They have 2 classrooms for our alternate curriculum program students, our HCQ students, who need a lot more support. We have 2 classrooms for our PD students, our behavior disorder students, who need, again, extra support in the classrooms and extra support as they go through the school day. Those 4 classrooms at Paddock Lane bump their lunch schedule up a half an hour. So you have Stoddard and Lincoln that have access to more intervention time, have access to more time for recess, more time for PE, more time for music, more time for counseling, more time for the other specials. They have access to those teachers that can come into the classroom and work with the students a lot deeper. So there are discrepancies in our educational pieces as we are looking at this as well that happen. We also have said, okay, over at Paddock Lane, because to duplicate or triplicate the services, one, we would have to expand our buildings because we don't have any other buildings to take care of students with higher needs. The other thing, we would have to expand our staff as well. So those are things we could do, but that all comes at a large cost. So one of the other things that we talked about is just equity of services. If you think about it, we have students that need extra services during the day. We have DHHS, so the Department of Health and Human Services, that will come in and conduct interviews with our kids. We have the police that will stop by and conduct an interview as well, or maybe do a child abuse investigation. We have Nebraska Mental Health that provides mental health services with our students. Blue Valley Behavioral Health. Teammates comes in. We have our counselors that want to do small group counseling sessions. At this current point in time, there is no room in the end So they come in, they have to maybe kick out the administrator out of their office, or kick the counselor out of their office, or the nurse's office, and use some of those different places. Now, we become as creative as we possibly can because we know the kids need it. But there also is sometimes where an administrator is working with the child and they can't. Or the counselor is dealing with another situation. So those are some things that we're running into that we just cannot provide all the services and the services in a confidential area. Because we know confidentiality is key when you are dealing with some of these higher levels of concern. So if you look at some different research pieces, because one of the things we say, is, okay, well, will a school just solve all our problems? A new building, you say you want a new building, it's just going to solve everything. Well, it's not going to solve everything. We're still going to have kids that will come hungry to school. We're still going to have other things that will happen. We're still going to have kids that will struggle with reading. We're still going to have kids that will struggle with attendance or other pieces. But there are some research points out there that do show that it does make an impact. So there are 7 key areas that explain 16% in the variation in pupils' academic progress. So some of these 7 key areas were light, temperature, air quality, ownership, flexibility, complexity, and color. Well, right now, the air in our elementaries comes from the ground. It does not come from up above. Because our roof is our ceiling is our roof. We cannot put units above on top of the school and then drill into the roof/ceiling. So right now, all of the air that our kids are breathing are coming from underground tunnels. So just making a simple change with the new building to where you provide that air quality that's coming in from the outside, that fresh air return. If that helps our students improve 16% in an academic area, that'd be awesome. Because what you're talking about is if you have a student at the 50th percentile, so they're average. But if I can get them up to the 66th percentile, wouldn't that be fantastic? They're now above average. But look at it the other way. I can start at the 50th percentile, but now I go down to the 34th percentile. That's now not meeting standards at all. That's behind. And so those are some of the things that we're talking about is, yes, again, it's not a cure-all. We know that. But there is research out there to support that we will see positive gains. The next one has been shown that for 10 to 12-year-olds, numerical and language test speeds increased when temperature was reduced slightly and ventilation rates were increased. So it goes back to that ventilation. Next piece shows what happened 4 years after students moved into a new school. So the first 2 points talk about improvements, modest improvements in English language arts, modest improvements in students' average math test scores. But I think the third bullet point gets to the heart of it. If our students come to school, they're going to see improvements. And what do they see? The attendance rates rose. And I think that is huge. If we can get students to school, if they want to come to the building, if they have pride in where they are, if they have pride in where they're going, that is huge because then guess what? They're there, they can hear the instruction, they can be part of the process, they can be part of being engaged in what we need to be engaged in and be moving forward. And teacher reported grades rose as well. But that third bullet point is creeping in. Okay, so I am going to turn it back over Mr. Alexander, just to kind of start wrapping up our conversations.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about some of the video, but now let's talk about some of the advantages of the single-site facility. And if I'm talking too loud, I apologize, but I want to make sure you can hear me and they can hear me. So, in a single-site facility, there are numerous efficiency improvements in all sectors of the educational programmatic delivery process. So, that's a lot of words, right? What's it mean? Well, if you break down education to the very sectors of every single sector that exists in education, we start talking about everything from kitchen delivery service, food delivery service. We start talking about secretarial, that's a position. We start talking about custodial, we start talking about every single thing that is part of that programmatic delivery process. And we start analyzing it, and we start saying, well, if if we take a look at that and the advantage we have in eliminating duplications of services and become more efficient in every sector that we're talking about, we save money and it helps pay for the building. Okay? Now, that does not mean people are going to lose their jobs. We've been asked that question. Well, does that mean I'm going to lose my job? No, that's not what it means. Especially when it comes to our teachers. And here's the reason why. Folks, we're going to have 800 to 1,000 elementary students for a long time. The census shows that. Okay? So we're not going to be able to change that scenario. We already have, quite frankly. We've addressed that in the number of teachers that we have on staff, personnel that we have on staff. Okay? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know this, but where is this school going to be?
Okay. Great question. Out by the high school, the school board purchased 93 acres right across the highway from.
That's right at the end of my street.
Yeah.
So what?
Well, I don't know where you live.
Traffic?
We'll
How's
get to that.
gonna be a problem?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Okay. Back to this. Let's take the food sector, for example. Now, earlier, you heard me talk about our kitchenasians, okay? In each one of those kitchenasians, we have 2 servers, so that's a total of 8 people, and we also have a truck driver and a person that helps load the food that's prepared at 9 a.m. in the morning, between 9 and 10 a.m. in the morning, put into trick warmers, loaded onto the truck, driven across town to be dropped off at the elementary schools. Now, right there's a duplication of service in 4 buildings that we can eliminate or reduce significantly. And we can also reduce the cost of the insurance on a vehicle, 2 people to manage that vehicle, because it does take 2 people to load those trays, get them up on there, get them off, and get them into the buildings, especially during the wintertime, which is predominantly a majority of the time that we're in school. Now, last year we had a situation that occurred where those truck drivers were absent because of the pandemic. And bless their hearts, we had 2 substitutes come in. All right? And those 2 substitutes did what they were supposed to do. They went in, they got the food in the warmers, loaded them up on the trucks, but forgot to strap them down. So when they went to deliver and they turned the first corner, guess what happened? Nobody's fault. They're trying to help us out. But that's what happens when you have that type of service. A, it's inefficient. B, it's very unhealthy. And C, our kids deserve better. Teacher, yeah, question.
Just going back before on the percentile, what percentile are we in right now versus the rest of the state?
In regards to,
For the funding of the education?
For academics,
Yeah.
it depends on what subject you're
it
talking
depends
about.
on what subject, but usually we tend to land average-wise 55th to 60th percentile. So we maintain that average, above average, kind of dabble right there, in the 8, depending upon where we are.
Okay.
Yep.
Some other,
Yeah, next question.
yeah.
I apologize. So are you talking with this new facility that food will be prepared there?
Yes.
Or will they still be transported?
No, it'd be prepared there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the point I'm trying to get at is that in our middle school, we have a kitchen. So that's one of the reasons why we're putting more emphasis on talking about our elementary schools as well. So
Okay.
good question. One of the other advantages to a single site facility is teacher collaboration. Right now, we have different grade levels and different buildings. And those teachers at different grade levels can't meet effectively to talk about problem solving with students in the buildings because they're in different spots. So that's a small example of an efficiency that can be created. We've heard numerous times with some of the issues that we deal with on a daily basis, well, we need an administrative presence in all 3 of our elementary schools. Well, once again, you hire another principal, you just increase your personnel costs to the district. okay? But a single site allows us possibly to reduce that number instead of increasing. Enhanced safety and security, we've covered that. More inclusive environment, ADA, that's what that's all about. Is kids that have disabilities are more part of the programmatic delivery of the service of school. Reduction of facility and operating costs, okay? And so what that we're talking about with the reduction of operating costs is just the utility usage that we have between those 4 schools per year with new, more efficient equipment. The utility costs alone drop significantly. That's one area, utility usage. Let's talk about snow plowing. Let's talk about lawn mowing. Let's talk about all of those things that go into the basic upkeep, building, and operation management of a building. Let's talk about the difference between geothermal energy and energy we currently use. Let's talk about the possibilities of solar power and how much efficiency we can create with solar power. Those are all options that, quite frankly, are out there, but we have to work our way through those conversations, which we have not done. Okay? In short, the issues, violations are not a simple fix for these aging buildings. They're just not, folks. If they were, I have every faith that previous administration would have taken care of them. But we've run into a time period where everything that's simple has been taken care of. Now it's the big things that we have to look at. Options. Okay, so we've talked to you about the inefficiencies, we've talked to you about the deficiencies, we've talked to you about the issues that we have. So let's talk about options of what we have available to us to fix it. The first one is bonds. We could try and run a bond issue that's voted on by the public and that raises taxes, because bonds raise taxes, okay? So that's one. We can talk about a lease purchase. A lease purchase doesn't require us to raise taxes. There's some issues with it. It's not perfect, but it's a solution. It's an option, okay? We can talk about a lease buyback. That's another option. Same kind of idea, just a little bit different. I'll explain more. P3 public-private partnership. That's another option that's out there that, quite frankly, I haven't spent a lot of time investigating yet because that conversation's yet to come in the highway of conversations. And then finally, there's a fifth one that we're looking into right now that we just learned about and we're exploring right now, that we have multiple conversations yet to be held to see if it's doable. So that is not up there right now. And we found out about it before we had a chance to build a slideshow. So let's talk about a bond issue, okay? And we talk about 10 or 15 cents because our plan involves that 10-cent number. Valuation on a $100,000 house and a 10-cent bond annually would cost the homeowner $100. On a $300,000 home, it costs $300. At 15 cents annually, those two differences are $150 annually and $450 annually. On a 500-acre farm, that's the value, that's the cost to the owner at a value of a farm that's $2.6 million. $2,675 for 10 cents and $4,012 for 15 cents. 1,000-acre farm valued at $5.3 million. There's the differences. Now I realize for the agricultural people in the audience, there's a difference between farm ground, whether it's dry land or irrigated or pasture or whatever the case may be. There's a difference. So these numbers fluctuate a little bit depending on what kind of ground it is. But when we had D.A. Davidson run them, they ran them on an average. So that's just an average, okay? And you can see the effect of what we're talking about annually, monthly, and then daily. So in essence, when we start talking about a $100,000 or $300,000 home, we're talking about a few cents a day, not even the cost of a cup of coffee. Now when you get into a 500-acre farm, that changes a little bit, $10.99 a day. When you get into a 1,000-acre farm, it's over $20 a day. So just depending on what type of situation we're talking about, it changes. Well, let's talk about option 2, the lease purchase. Okay? The lease purchase operates like this, right? And the best analogy I can give you is think about a car or a vehicle. You can go, the manufacturer builds the car, right? You go into the dealership, and you have a choice of how you want to pay for that car. You can either pay it all out of your pocket up front. You can write a check for it all at once, which I don't know very many people who do that anymore. I don't do that, but maybe some people do. Or you have the opportunity to put that on payments and amortize it out over a period of time. Lease purchase operates the same way. Okay? We've been in contact with Johnson Controls, mainly because 2.5 years ago, Johnson Controls came and said, we think we can help you with this issue. That's why. And they've been there since. They've talked to us, they've explained it to us, they've worked with us, they've done some work for us to explain it further. And ultimately what it comes down to is we procure a lease purchase option and amortize it out over 4 different leases over 28 years. Why do you say 4 and 7, Mr. Alexander? Why? Well, in state statute, schools can only lease purchase, anybody can only lease purchase in a public entity for up to 7 years at a time. That's probably the imperfect part about it, to be honest, is that there's some concerns that come along with that. So we have to work our way through those and figure those out. But that's an option of how it would work. We would have 4 leases of 7 years stacked up on top of each other to create the 28-year payment period to pay off the building. So then you ask, well, okay, that's great. How does that work in terms of dollars and cents for us? Well, currently, we also, in the state of Nebraska, have a $1.05 property tax levy cap. So that means our levy cannot be more than $1.05. Now there's some things that are outside of the levy, Quality Capital Purpose Undertaking Fund, or QCPUF, that we can make repairs to buildings on, which has been accessed before. It's limited, but it doesn't count against your $1.05. Okay? So what we do is out of that $1.05, we figure out what our operating costs are for our general fund. And we say, this is what we can operate off of in our general fund. All right? We're building our current budget to operate our general fund off of about 94.5, 95 cents for next year. So we're proposing that we take 10 cents and put it in the special building fund. That 10 cents generates $1.3 million on our current valuations. That $1.3 million then, coupled with the energy savings, the operational savings, the personnel savings, and the capital cost avoidance, because we now have new equipment that's not costing us money to keep going, coupled with the $1.3 million annually going into our special building fund, those payments come together to make the lease payment every single year. So it's very similar to what happens in your checking account when you buy a new car. You get your revenue in, you pay your house payment, you pay your car payment, you pay your bills, you pay whatever, and then you operate off of what's left over. Very similar process. So that's a lease purchase. With a lease buyback, it's a little bit different, but very similar. All that means is that someone comes in, builds the building for us, we enter into a procurement lease with that company, and for 25 to 35 years, we go about the same process. We're paying them back for building the building. They own it. We create the preventative maintenance agreement. And we can make that whatever we want. As difficult or as easy, as expensive or less expensive as we want. From A to Z. So if we want them to take care of the maintenance of the lights, the HVAC, and the energy utility efficiency, we build that into the contract and we pay for it. If we want it to be A, B, C, D, we have that. If we want it to be A to J, we have that built in. We're in control of that preventative maintenance contract. Okay? And that's built in to the lease. At the end of that 25 to 35 year period, we've created a building, we've created a preventative maintenance project that meets our ability and our budget possibilities, and they turn over the keys to us when we make that last payment to them. And we basically have a building that we've been in for 25 to 35 years that because we've created a preventative maintenance agreement with the company to maintain it, they've maintained it over that 25, 35 years period of time, and we have a building that has 75% of maintenance of life expectancy left in it. Okay? So it's kind of like if you rent a house or if you lease a home, okay? The landlord's going to take care of everything that's in there, right? Or the person you rent it from, they're going to take care of everything. You don't have any of those expenses unless you choose to. You want to paint it, and they say, yeah, paint it, you pick the color, we'll pay for the paint, whatever. Those are small examples, okay? But that's what the concept of that is. Same exact payment scheme. We're estimating a $40 million building. Where are we getting that number from? It's very simple math. 120,000 square foot building at $250 per square foot is roughly a $40 million project. That's based off of today's construction cost per square foot, 250 per square foot. Now we're going to show you that back in 2013 or 15, when we ran a bond issue for that, the cost per square foot was extensively less than it is now. And that's not going to change looking into the future. Yes?
Why didn't you do this back then?
We tried. We'll explain.
I mean, I know you did the bond, but you
Yeah.
tried this?
Oh, back then, I don't know why I wasn't here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is there any examples recently in the state of Nebraska that have done and executed something like this?
Yes, multiple examples, all variations of this, but the same concept. So some have created public agencies to do this. Some schools have done it on themselves. The most recent two examples are DC West Public Schools and David City Public Schools. They did a lease purchase at David City, okay? And I can explain the details as to why they did that, but in the essence of everybody's time, if you're interested in that, come talk to me later, okay? So yes, this is happening in other places. It's happened for years in other places. That's a great question as to why not here. I can't answer that. Yeah.
Okay, so you got here Johnson Controls going into these purchase, however you're saying it, buyback. Now, if you're talking about with the HVAC, electrical, and anything else to do with construction, maintenance and all that. Now, I guess I'm a little bit lost here. The Johnson Controls, let's say, they're out of Omaha, Kansas City, and you guys decide to go with them. What's the time factor that it's going to take from you calling someone out of Omaha or Kansas City to get up here and handle a problem when you get a hold of a local contractor and breaking that lease agreement?
That's a great question. So the question is, so everybody can hear it, if we say for instance we're going with Johnson Controls, okay, just because they've been the one that's there talking to us, and we have this lease agreement with them, and we contract with them a HVAC, lighting, and plumbing. Okay, so we contract with them to maintain that. But they have to send somebody out of Omaha or Lincoln to take care of it, to fix it. Does that break the lease? Am I understanding your question?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. And here's the other good news about that. Our Johnson Controls has a guy that lives about 2 blocks away from some of our school board members right here in Indianapolis. So there's technicians right here in Indianapolis that work on those things.
Don't you think you'd have a better chance with this with having, working with local people instead of Lincoln, Omaha, Kansas City?
So the question really is, do local people have the opportunity to work up a bid on these?
Well, you got the bid, but like I said, you get into a lease agreement with them, you're necessarily not going to break that lease agreement, correct?
Well, it depends on what we have in the lease agreement. And if they can't fix it, then in this particular process, if they can't fix it, they're responsible for fixing it if it's in our lease agreement. Okay? So let's just say plumbing is in our lease agreement, but Johnson Controls doesn't have a guy. Let's say their guy's sick or dies or needs replaced or whatever the case may be. They're responsible for fixing it. So whatever they have to do to fix it, that's in the lease agreement. They got to fix it. At the beginning of the project, when we RFP all that out, any local contractor has the ability to bid on it.
Yeah, I know.
And then after that, it's up to us to whether or not we want to lease with that local contractor or we want to lease with Johnson Controls. So depending on who gets the contracts for those different parts of the project will be determine how we set up that preventative maintenance agreement. Does that make sense? Okay. So
Jason,
Yeah, Matt.
Johnson Controls came to you, and great. So is the district gonna be shopping around to see what other opportunities may lie elsewhere, other companies, anything like that?
Yeah. Here's how that happened. Just so we're on the up and up about Johnson Controls.
What's the history on that a little bit?
Yeah, look, the history is Johnson Controls has been in charge of the district's HVAC, electrical, all of those systems for many years. I can't tell you exactly, but I can tell you that when we did the Quality Capital Purpose Undertaking Fund project with the ceilings and the lights, Johnson Controls won the RFP to put in the lights at that time, and that was in about 2009-10 area. Don't quote me, but somewhere in that neighborhood. So Johnson Controls has a long established relationship with Beatrice Public Schools. Are there other companies out there that could come to us with this plan? Yes, there are, and we would entertain the idea of talking with them. But there aren't very many companies that can come to us with the ability to finance the plan on the front end and work it through till the very end. So that's one of the reasons why Johnson Controls is in the discussions. And quite frankly, they came to us with a solution. And it really comes from a guy that retired from Johnson Controls and put me in contact with the new guy that we're in a lot of communication. At the end of the day, I don't think it's important to get hung up on the Johnson Controls thing, because honestly, they may finance the project for us, but they may never do any of the work for it. That's all going to have to go through the RFP process. That's a state law. So they have to do that. They have to go out, RFP stands request for proposal. They have to go out and seek bids for that. Otherwise, they're in violation. Reasons. The reality, folks, is that we need 5 new schools. 5 new schools are needed when we talk about the middle school included. The recognition that taxpayers can't afford the entire increase associated with all 5, we get it. Okay? Taxes are high enough in the state of Nebraska. As a superintendent, I firmly believe that. We have taken plans to our state officials time and time again to come up with solutions to that. And time again, our elected officials tell us we can't increase any taxes anyway. We can't come up with other sources of revenue. And that's what our state needs, because we're too reliant on property. You look around us. South Dakota came up with a solution, tourism. Wyoming has oil and gas. Iowa, I don't really know. Kansas, I don't know how they fund their schools either. But there's solutions out there. We just have to be willing, as elected officials, to take a look and keep an open mind. Okay? But the bottom line is, you will talk to any superintendent in the state and they will tell you property taxes are too high. We firmly agree with that. Why do this? This maximizes our budget expenditures and keeps taxes from going up. A lease purchase, a lease buyback prevents taxes from going up. It's, as a school district, we say we're going to solve the problem. We are going to take control of this issue and we are going to solve the problem. It requires some budgeting. It requires some discipline. It requires understanding everything, but it can happen. And we're willing to take that on, that responsibility. Somewhere in the near future, the middle school needs addressed. We know that. Right now we're talking about PK5. The reason is, just like I said, we don't have kitchens in those buildings. They are the most deficient buildings that we have. They also operate the most inefficiently in our district as compared to all the others. So that's why we target those schools. But we know at some point we're going to have to come up with a plan for the middle school. And I'll tell you, the school board has said we'll handle the PK5. In our budgeting process, we've got it figured out. Okay? But at some point, the community is going to have to come along if we want to do something with the middle school and say, okay, we're going to help out. Why build a new school? A new school allows students to learn in a modern environment. Currently, the elementary schools are unsafe, inefficient, and have high costs to operate and maintain. The cost to build a new school under a lease purchase or lease purchase buyback prevents property taxes from going up. We have access right now. This is probably one of the biggest key factors of all of this, folks. This is why time is of the essence. Right now, we have access to $2.3 million of ESSER's 3 funds. That's federal funding coming to us that we can apply towards the cost of this project. And right now, it's $2.3 million. In a short period of time, we're going to get an ESSER's 4 that's also going to have a chunk of money, and I don't know what that is right now because we haven't been told, but we're going to get another chunk of money that we can apply to this project. And on top of that, Congress is in the process, if they haven't already, of approving a congressional infrastructure bill that will include funding for education in the United States, because we recognize coming out of the pandemic, we have a lot of work to do to get school buildings up to the par that they need to be in order for safety reasons. So literally, I'm just taking a stab in the dark. I know right now we have $2.3 million, but literally in 5 months time period, we could have double that amount to put towards the cost of the project. So our $40 million project comes down, which decreases our need for these. You get the idea. Matt.
Can you back up to the previous slide, please? I was heavily involved with the first bond issue, trying to get that passed. I get the single site building. It makes sense to me. I understand that, and I desire that. That's just me. In that process of preparing for that bond, we heard from a lot of people, and there's point number 2 that says recognition that taxpayers can't afford entire increase associated with 5 buildings, and there's some gist in that. But there's one word there to say that I don't care for is the can't. We faced a lot of opinions on I won't support a single site elementary building. I want this building to remain here. And with all these issues that you talked about, they are extremely expensive. There's a lot of replication buildings, but I think that a lot of those can be fixed with massive renovation and a massive cost.
Right.
And I don't know if this money that you talked about in the next slide can be put towards that or not, but when we talk about community support, you said, this board says we got the pre-K 5 figured out, we're going to need community support from middle school. Absolutely, that makes sense. But the fact that there was from what I could see, several reasons that the bond didn't pass, but one big one was, I want this school here. I want it in the neighborhood. The term neighborhood school doesn't apply anymore, but I want this building here. And so, I just think, as we work through this, as we talk to more people, and as you're trying to buy in to more community support, that's going to be a big thing to overcome, quite frankly. I'm not trying to downplay anything that's going on here, but that's one big thing that this community is really attached to. Again, it's an extreme expense, and when we had these information meetings before our first bond issue that was proposed, there was a dollar amount attached to the renovation versus the new construction. It was astronomical. You can go back, you guys have all that info. It was astronomical.
It's up here.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
But I just think, from the community buy-in standpoint, that's a big thing. I mean, like I said, there's other reasons. That was a big one. And so I don't know what the answer is to that, but so far I like what I see here. Don't get me wrong, but when you talk about needing buy-in for a middle school, there's going to be some issues to overcome there from a community buy-in standpoint. I'm sure. Yeah.
That's a great point. And I came to actually I Facebook Live one of those meetings, and I came to one of those meetings. And the neighborhood school philosophy is a big hurdle, right? And I get it, I understand it. And the best answer I have for that is neighborhood schools were built and meant for a time period when kids walked across the street to school in the morning after getting fed breakfast at home in the morning. Kids walked back across the street at noon and got fed lunch at school. Kids then walked back to school and went to school the rest of the afternoon and then walked back home. So your point is well understood, well taken, and I get where the community rests on that. But the bottom line is, these schools, these neighborhood schools, were built for 1950. And now people work all day long. And they want their kids to be in school all day long. That's what we heard last year. Our kids need to be in school. And they're right. That's where we want kids. So somewhere we have to recognize all the factors that come into play with that. And you're right, Matt. So, and we do have those renovation costs up here that you were part of when you had those discussions. So, getting back to this, again, federal funding is a big part of this. I don't know how else to say it, but we're getting a gift of this money to use how we want to use it. And what's our biggest need right now? Our biggest priority has got to be taking care of these schools. Now, some of that funding, I want this to be clear, some of that funding has to go back into the learning loss. It has to go back into academia. So we have plans for that. The reality is that $2.3 million doesn't represent all the money that we're getting. We're actually getting 2.9, but 20% has to go back in to academia. So that's part of the equation. New construction estimated at $40 million. Building fund kicking in 10 cents annually generates $1.3 million on our current valuations. The energy, the operation and maintenance, the personnel, the cost avoidance savings annually, we estimate can be another $1.3 million that we have to put towards this project. So essentially, what that means is, after we do all this analysis and we say, we've got $2.6 million to go towards paying these buildings off faster than what we thought we did. But we have to get to that point first. Okay? Why these options? Quite honestly, I think this will be the answer to your question. The district is looking to close 4 elementary schools and build 1 large PK-5. The bond proposal for that, number one, in 2015, was going to cost $33.9 million. It failed 60% to 39%. 1 year later, or 1 year and a couple months later, in 2016, the board elected to go through it for another bond issue. The cost of construction had now gone up to $34.8 million, and it failed 68 to 31. That's for the project we're talking about right now. Okay? The history of bond issues on top of those two in Beatrice is that in 1991, a special bond issue was run for a new high school. It failed 67 to 32. It was run again in May of 1994. It failed 52 to 47. It was run again in 1994, in November of 1994, failed again 54 to 45. Between this bond issue in November of 94 and May of 96, a tornado happened and took out part of the high school. And that's when the bond issue passed. So what we've heard from our community is that we don't want taxes to go up. The community has spoken, and we've said, okay, we get it. We're going to figure out a different solution. For PK-5, for 6A, we need your help. That's all there is to it. We need your help. Matt talked about the renovation costs. This will blow your mind. In 2015, based off these are the buildings, and based off of the square footages that those buildings consist of, the estimated cost for renovations in these buildings was $12.4 million. So that was just bringing everything up to code. Okay? In 2018, same process, the renovation and repair costs and construction costs had escalated to where for the PK-5, it was $23 million. So in the period of 3 years, the cost to do the same amount of work doubled in those buildings. And then,
Was that after the fire marshal?
that would have been after the fire marshal order. Yep. And then, when you throw in the middle school renovation was $12.2 million, we're talking at a total of $35.3 million. So still below where we're at today, right? To do all of it, to renovate. In 2018, the estimated cost for replacement, so they did a renovation projection and they did an estimated cost for replacement projection. Replacement of the PK5 was $35.6 million. So we're talking $40 million now. In 2018, that would have been a $35 million project. If you throw in the middle school at a $30 million cost to replace it, you're talking about $65.6 million total. That's what we're saying, as a school district, we recognize what we've got to do because we can't continue to kick the can down the road. So we're going to pick up the cost here, but we're going to have help to do it all. And it makes a lot of sense to do it all. Quite frankly, you sound like a contractor. Contracting experience? HVAC? Okay? If you have to mobilize twice to do a project, that's more expensive, right? So while we're doing this, it would make a lot of sense to do it all at one time. So we only have to mobilize companies once as compared to twice, whether they're local or not local. The more times you have to have them come to a site to do this, the more the cost increases. Yeah.
I just want to say that I'm a substitute para. I love it. Kids are fantastic. I've been to all these schools, and they are dark. And I am on board with this. We need a new school. I'm not thrilled about the middle school, but each one of these schools, I don't know how the teachers do it, you know. So I have to go because I'm tired, but,
It's a long
it
presentation,
is,
but thanks for bearing
I
it.
am on board with this, and so.
Well, thank you for
I
being
hope it happens.
a substitute
Yeah.
paraeducator
Yeah.
because, man, there is not enough of you out there
I
right
know,
now. So
I
we
know
love you.
that.
Thank you.
I know, all right.
Okay, have a good evening. So there are the renovation projections that we've been through since 2015. We're now in 2021. And the next slide talks about advantages. So Aaron Chadwick's going to talk about that.
Thanks. Okay, so Jason talked a lot about deficiencies and inefficiencies in our current buildings. I'm just going to summarize those just to remind you all of what we're facing. I'm going to start with the deficiencies. These are really concerning as a school board member whose ultimate job is caring for the kids in the district. We have fire marshal orders, some serious problems there. We've got food inspection violations and very few fixes. We've got ADA compliance issues. We've got electrical systems with HVAC units that are out of date. Parts are becoming obsolete and is not bringing the freshest air possible into our buildings. Our food service program is inefficient. We have kitchenasiums. We need a kitchen and a cafeteria to be more efficient as a district. And Jason hinted at this earlier. We're not just going to fire everyone. We're going to use attrition and other processes that we've already used. But we've got some positions that already overlap across these buildings. And as of last night, unless something's changed in the last 24 hours, we're still looking for food service providers. So, you know, these positions aren't just going to be eliminating people. We don't have the people. We're using 1950s buildings. It's 2021. And there's a lot of issues there with the way kids learn now and technology that is needed in these buildings. There's equitable learning issues across all of our buildings and a lack of teacher collaboration. And then I think getting back to this neighborhood school idea, there's an increased cost to the district if we do renovate these buildings and continue with the neighborhood idea, because we'll have salary increases to duplicate the services across all of the schools to provide special ed programming for every elementary school. So we're here because we're just trying to find some options that best suit the needs of the district and our students. As Jason mentioned, we've got $2.3 million in ESSERS funding. We've got an additional, probably close to $2 million coming with ESSERS 4. There's also some language in the infrastructure bill that's very promising from the federal government as far as grants and new monies that could be available for us to utilize for a new facility. The biggest draw for a lot of us on the board with these options that we're exploring, and as Jason mentioned, we've not decided on any one of them, but we're hoping to not increase your taxes because that's a big deal for the district. And right now, low interest rates are really attractive to doing any of these options. One of the issues with the lease purchase option that we're running up against is our state legislature is trying to remove this as a tool for districts to utilize. And for a lot of districts, that's really devastating. And for us, that could cause some complications in choosing an option for building something outside of a bond issue. So last year, it was LB 523 that they attempted to pass. It did not go through, but it sounds. We've gotten a lot of great questions so far tonight, and I know those have been recorded. If you have more questions, or if others that you talk to have questions, please visit the website, submit those questions, let us know. We're compiling an FAQ list so that we'll have all of these questions and answers available to people as they come across questions. That's all I got.
Okay, so, thank you. With that said, that pretty much wraps up what we came here tonight to do, and what we've done 2 other times, 2 other nights. I can't emphasize enough a sincere and grateful thank you for coming, because these things need to be talked about, and they're not easy to talk about. They're not easy for us to talk about, but they need to be talked about because ultimately we have to come up with solutions. That's the bottom line, and we deserve better. And here's the thing, folks. People are going to give us a million reasons why. A million reasons why we should not do this. It's not good for them. And it's time to quit kicking the can down the road and do something about it. For 1,000 good reasons. Don't give me a million bad reasons. I've got 1,000 good ones that I think about, and our principals think about, and our staff thinks about daily. So I thank you for coming out tonight. Where we're at now is question time. You guys have been the most interactive audience we've had in 3 sessions, so thank you for asking the question. But we'll surely entertain more. You can stay as long as you want and listen to the answers to those. As Aaron said, we have a frequently asked questions document that we'll be putting up after we've gone through this process and we think we have a grasp on all the questions. Yeah.
So the only thing I really got going with one building, granted, doing 6 to 8 out there too. You guys done any I guess research on flow of traffic with the highway being there, BSDC being there, and you're gonna bring 4 neighborhood or 5 neighborhood schools all in one location, plus you're gonna have the middle school on top of that, and you already have the high school.
It's a great question.
I just, if kids need to go back and forth to the high school, are you gonna be waiting for a traffic light to run across the highway?
Yeah. I think
Something I missed, or?
no. I think you're right on target. I think that study has been done in the past. I can't say that I've researched a lot of it, but I think you're right. I would say the advantage that we have on our side, and I'm trying to get back to the slide, is that, quite honestly, we have a concern about the traffic flow, but we have every bit of confidence in our city to work with us on that traffic flow and come up with enough exits and entries. The big thing that we have on our side out there is room, space. Right now,
But that's what I'm saying too, is anyone who has kids in Lincoln Elementary, Stoddard, and that, just the volume of cars in that.
Right.
What do you gotta look, you can't just jam pack people in a parking lot and say, get out of here.
right. You're exactly right. And what we do know is it can't be any worse than any of the buildings we're at right now. We do know that because the one thing we have on our side is space, and we can create exits, as many exits and entries as the architects tell us we need to. Now, there's a cost that comes with that, obviously. But right now, we can't do that at the schools we're in, which is another reason why our neighborhood schools, and I understand the philosophy, I love that term, but right now, we have accidents waiting to happen at all 3 of our elementaries and our preschool because of the very issue you're talking about, and that's traffic flow. So out there on the 93 acres, we got space on our side. Good question. Yeah.
When it comes to that lease, purchase, or buyback, I mean, I'm sure other people here too, I'm not very well versed in that, and that this has helped me understand it a bit better, but maybe you did explain it, I just missed it, but is there one option or another that is maybe better in terms of for what we're looking to do, or is it just kind of depend on when you decide to pull that trigger to like, is it, you're just gonna kind of see which is best fit for Beatrice, or do you have an idea already between the two that you like better?
Some of that's a great question. So the question is, in terms of the lease purchase or the lease buyback, is there one option that's better than the other? And what I would tell you is they both have positives. In the lease purchase, we run into some issues with 4 leases for 7 years stacked on top of each other. But we also know that there's maybe some incentive because of interest rates of being able to renew those leases. So from one 7-year period to the next 7-year period to the next 7-year period, we could run into one of two things. Either an interest rate drop, which would benefit us, or an interest rate increase, which would not. On the lease procurement, the lease buyback, it's a set rate of 25 to 35 years, which currently that's pretty darn good. It's as good as it's ever been. But should it be awful nice if it dropped another 0.5%, we could take advantage of it. So you just have those gains that you have to deal with.
And I guess, sorry, I wanted to piggyback off that. Let's say you decide to go through with this, and it comes down to, well, do we do a lease purchase or lease buyback? I mean, whose decision does that come down to then? Is that a school board decision, or is that, how will you decide? Because obviously there's going to be some argument, should we just take the current rate, or do we gamble and hope it goes down? I mean, I guess, how does that get decided then?
What it'll really come down to is that after we get, right now Johnson Controls has presented us with a phase 1 plan. And phase 1 just says that we enter into an agreement with them to go through a massive set of studies and come up with what those construction costs are going to be. And then once we have those construction costs and the lease prices in front of us, which is at least 3 to 4 months out yet, we would then take a look at that time period and be able to look at these two options and say, this one's better for us at this time because of this reason, or this one's better for us at this time because of this reason. And I want to remind you all that we're talking about these options, but there's a whole other option out there that we haven't even, our board is not even fully aware of yet, because we just learned about it, that quite honestly, is probably the best option yet. So all I can say to you is we're doing our due diligence to make sure that we do what's necessary to come up with the best possible solution to this plan for Beatrice, for our students. And that's task, that's work. But we're going to do the work, we're going to do our due diligence to make sure that we put the best option in front of our people. Yeah.
I know a lot of places like, if you're looking into doing something, rooftop units with the electrical upgrade, a lot of people want like minimum 3 bids. You were saying that there's other companies out there like Johnson Controls that can give us this type of scenario and look at everything for us as a big whole picture. Have you guys looked at anyone else? I think that might be a big push to get some of the public on board is, hey, we just didn't pick this guy at random.
We've talked to some other people that are capable of, the big question is, can they finance it? And so in terms of construction contractors, there's not a lot of them that want to front that money up front. Johnson Controls, I didn't even know did this, to be honest with you, until about 2.5 years ago. And they build buildings all over the world. And they finance those buildings up front or create partnerships like this. There's all kinds of creative solutions to financing. There are a lot of other companies out there that will do that, just to be honest.
Well, I'm just saying I know them pretty well, and yeah, they can back it because they pretty much got you, I shouldn't say cornered, but I mean, we showed that Luther opening, their name is stamped right on the side of that actuator, so all the way down to the minor things that make things work, their name's stamped on it, and they're making something
Yep. That's one of the biggest concerns about this process that we have to be very, very cognizant of. Is that when we enter into that first lease agreement, that's all well and fine. But what do 2, 3, and 4 look like? Because we don't want to get into an open-ended lease agreement situation. That's not good for anybody. So I guess what I would tell you, to ease your mind a little bit, is none of these options are being discussed without the school's legal counsel being part of that discussion. And I hope everybody understands that, because that's very, very important. Our legal counsel, our school lawyers, okay, we work with a couple different firms, depends on what issue we're dealing with. But our school lawyers are going to look out for our backside. And I'm not going anywhere without them looking out for our backside. Because we do not want to enter into something that's going to be a worse situation down the road. So I agree with you 100%. Lucas.
We talked about all the safety stuff and the violations and the fire codes. And at what point are these buildings like simply condemned, where you cannot put students in them? Like how far is that out?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked it, because I think we got asked the first night, but we didn't last night. And we've been asked by some other people that same question. So the question is, when does the fire marshal come in and say, enough's enough, you're done? Okay, just openly transparent with you. I think the fire marshal would come in and say, you've got this amount of time. I've already given you since 2017, right? But you've got this amount of time to rectify these issues, or we go to the next step. What that next step is, I don't know. I'm more concerned with, to be honest with you, it's the one that probably aggravates me the most, and that is the health inspector coming in and saying, your food service for these buildings is shut off. Kids are going to brown bag it. And we can't feed them breakfast and we can't feed them lunch. And right now we get that free.
Those facilities like I've substitute taught, my mom's taught. You watch those kids run around in that circle during gym all day, they're all sweaty, they're all rolling around the floor, and then 10 minutes later they roll in the food, and it's like I've done lunch duty, you know.
Yeah.
It's the hardest. My wife, she said the same thing, it's like they don't have a lunchroom.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why it frustrates me so bad, is because after the last year of what we've been through, that has not been pleasant for anybody. I mean, nobody in here has enjoyed what we've been through in the last year. But we've heard time and time and time and time and time again about how unhealthy it is. The scenarios we're asking kids to go through by wearing a mask. But yet, that's okay? I think it's time to really ask ourselves, look in the mirror and say, is that really good for kids? Yeah.
What's the timeline for this, and how can we as parents help you pursue this?
Great question. Timeline and how can you help? First of all, being here tonight helps a ton. I wish we had this room packed. Last night we had 17. The night before that we had 17. This information is critical for parents to know and understand. As hard as it is to talk about, it's critical to talk about it. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, talk to your cousins, talk to their cousins, talk to your aunts, talk to your uncles, talk to everybody you possibly can to help us get the word out about these things. I think honestly, we're talking about a lot of things that as a mother, you're probably concerned. As a parent, I would be concerned. And I think we're going to hear, like I said, a million reasons why we shouldn't do this. But the reasons why we should are pretty important reasons. When we talk about 1,000 kids for the next 100 years, that's a lot of kids. And so those reasons are far more important than the million excuses as to why we've been given in the past this project isn't worth accomplishing. So show up to a board meeting. Tell your board members what you think as a parent. There's going to be those people that show up to the board meeting and say, we don't need this. We're just theatrics. We don't need this. We don't need this for this reason. One of the reasons I heard from the previous bond issue is because we had to drive into the sun to get out to that end of town. Come on. But it's okay for us to have schools that are in lockdown seven times a year, when we can fix that, to have ADA compliance issues, I'm not buying it. So we need you as parents to speak up and say, we as a community deserve better, but most importantly, those 1,000 reasons that show up on a daily basis deserve better. We need your voices. Being a silent supporter, for those of you that are here tonight, being a silent supporter is not good enough. We've got to have voices. Yeah.
So a couple things. Have you thought about like going to hold meetings at like the senior center, like places where people congregate, older population, look at our demographics of who vote here, you know, who failed, you know, why the bond issue didn't pass. Talk to them. And then secondly, what are the next steps? So you're talking about this, what do we do now?
Okay.
How fast does this go?
Great question. And it's been asked once, and I kind of got on my soapbox. So I said I would do that. I apologize. The next steps are this. We have a time period here where we have, like I said, still an option to explore, to talk about. We have conversations that are going to take place. We honestly wanted to be ready to move on this quicker, but it's just not going to happen as quick as we wanted it to, because we want to make sure our backside's covered, like we talked about. So our time frame, in all honesty, would be to try and get a solution in front of the board to vote on by December. That would be my goal. Now what I'm going to tell you folks is I spend almost all day, every day, on the phone, on a Zoom call, or talking to someone about this project. And there's just a lot of conversations that have to get to the end of that conversation before we're ready to say, this is the best option. So, best case scenario, we get something on the table December or January time frame, and we've got all the financing pieces figured out, we've got all the cost analysis and everything figured out, and we're ready to then start looking at architects. We start looking at building design, which really shouldn't take that long. We just all have to come to an agreement and live in the middle. Not everybody's going to get everything they want, because we're going to have some people that want this, and some people want this, and we got to come to the middle, and we got to agree on it. And then we go, once we get that done on architectural blueprint format, we're ready to roll. We start RFPing, we got a construction manager, we move. And those things all have to be decided yet. None of them have been decided. I'm here to tell you this, and I mean this sincerely. Johnson Controls has been the people who have been with us in this discussion from the beginning. That doesn't mean Johnson Controls is going to be the one that builds the building. Now, are they going to have the opportunity to bid on it like everybody else? Yes. But state statute's very clear on how that works. So RFPs have to be part of the process. Yeah.
Couple questions on a note that's just mentioned there, you know, meeting in the middle of design, things like that. Is Johnson Controls or whoever gonna come and say, we're gonna, you know, this is what we're thinking for a building, or you guys come up with a design and say, here's what we want, and they say, okay, or no, we're not gonna go that route. How much influence does Johnson Controls have on what the district pursues, what they want in a plan? And also in that same deal, part of the previous bond issues was demolition of our old buildings. Is there any talk or anything with our existing structures that are no good or whatever we don't want? I hate to see crap center, I hate it.
Yeah.
So we don't want that, so where does that come into play with this?
Okay, in reference to Johnson Controls, think of them law for salaries and wages, which many of you in here are going, what in the world is that? That's my worry, okay? That's legal counsel's worry. But it also has to meet, they have to meet the letter of the law statutorily in terms of RFPing out the process. So,
I understand that, but let's just say we take the building plan and say, I want a restroom right here. And
Right.
I say, yeah, I don't really think we need a restroom.
that's our call.
That's all on the district.
That's all on the district. Now, one of the advantages to having someone like this involved is they can put a cap with no contingencies, so contractors can't build in their contingencies.
That kind of answers my question.
Yeah. Because that's one of the things you run into when you do building projects is a lot of contractors want to build in those containers. Second question is about the old buildings. What do we do with those? Great question. I will tell you that currently right now we are organizing a meeting with the contractors in the community, okay, to have a discussion about how they can help us with that. Now, that could look a lot of different ways. Because if you look at Lincoln Elementary and you go on the back side where the dead end street is that I talked about, it goes all the way to the other end of campus and there's another street that connects. Boy, wouldn't it be nice to build a street all the way through there and have a housing subdivision on one side and then either Lincoln Elementary, something happen with it, whether it's tore down and we have another housing development on that side of it, or a private company wants to come in and renovate it at their cost, and it becomes apartment buildings. I mean, the options are endless as to, like Lincoln Elementary, that's probably a perfect place. On the other side of that, I'm just gonna be honest, there's a couple buildings that probably just need to be leveled and turned into a green space or something like that. So we have those discussions yet to come, but there are solutions out there. And some of them are being talked about as we speak. Yeah?
Now, what did you say what the estimated cost per year for payments would be?
Estimated cost for
What the payments would be per year?
for a $40 million project, we can figure that however we want to. Okay? So what we know is that in our budget right now, we can legitimately pay $1.3 million per year in what we're doing between our general fund and our building. And with the operational cost savings that we think we can accomplish by eliminating the duplications of services, we can at least come up with, let's say on a conservative side, $900,000 more. Okay? So that's $2.2 million that we could be putting towards buildings right now.
You gotta leave a little for, there's always,
Right.
repairs for the high school and so forth.
Yep. We got to build that in. You're exactly right. Lots of good questions. Lots of good questions. You guys have been awesome tonight. I can't say thanks enough for being here, asking our questions, thanks for coming, for being part of the discussion, and also asking how you can be part of the solution, because that's what we need. So with that, I'm going to say thank you again. We appreciate you. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to call me, to set up an appointment. I'll be glad to sit down with you when I don't have a phone going out of my ear. Have a good evening. Thank you.